Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's lecture, Sleep, the Hidden Ingredients, Sport Exercise and Performance Psychology. So, what I often get asked when I'm speaking to students, when I'm speaking to coaches, when I'm talking to parents or practitioners from different levels within sport structures, within sporting context, is how do you implement things at a higher level around nutrition, around strength and conditioning, around recovery, around stress, around the body, around all of these different aspects that are involved in the high end or the elite end of sport that, to quote one of the kind of misdiagnosed pieces of information across sports psychology is that what's giving you that 1% extra? What is it that's there that can provide something as such? And I would find with most athletes, when you go past a certain level, their diet tends to be really good. Their strength and conditioning programs from I guess from the people that they're undertaking them from. Hello everybody and welcome along to today's lecture, which was going to be about sleep, the hidden ingredient. Why do I call this lecture Sleep, the Hidden Ingredient? Well, actually working with athletes and practitioners across the last 12 to 15 years in both amateur and elite sport. Again, we hear that word elite and what kind of connotations are applied to that, or even professional sport here within Ireland and across the world also. So what do we see, what do we know, what do we learn, and what is it that we start off with? And I always ask students, what is your starting point on a topic that you might not be familiar with? Is it just a word that you've heard maybe in an article, online, in a post, etc. like that? What is it that, our ideas are, or our feelings or our beliefs around this? And sleep is one of them things where when I'm asked around, what is the priority of your work? What is the priority of your work undertaken? What's the parts that you can affect? What is it that really deciphers between, the top level and the level below, the amateur, the semi-professional, dual career athletes, let's say? One of the things that I would often point out is that, yes, okay, they have to have a high level of dedication and discipline, along with commitment towards their own nutrition and diet in order to be in peak physical conditioning to perform at the highest level. Okay, let's start with that point. Perfect. Do they also need to be physiologically ready? Do they have to have a good strength and conditioning program? Do they also need to be, working off good periodization programs? And actually, when coaches speak of periodization programs, and some national governing bodies have different views on this, but I would say actually the most important part of your periodization plan is that period in between being active and not being active. So when I hear periodization, I'd often say to coaches, well, tell me about the periods that are labelled as off, okay, or none on them days, as I seen it referred to previously. And them parts in between are the most important parts, they're the most sufficient parts in terms of rest, relaxation and recovery. This image that's on the screen is something that probably you are all familiar with, but, at this stage, you've probably heard of, come across the likes of recovery rooms, boots, recovery boots, cold water immersion, and what is the benefits of this? Are they closer to the time? What are they actually producing then again? So for me, for me personally, we can only get to energy in two ways: the food that we ingest and the sleep that we get. So essentially we need to be working on being really positive and really strict and disciplined, etc., as we say, with our diet, and being cognizant of that without being a robot. Okay, little thing in between that I'd always say called life. And then the next part of that is sleep is the one that's probably feeding that. Sleep for me it's the really good charger that you're sticking into the phone, and it's going to charge the body and everything within the body much quicker than if you're putting good nutrition into it. So sleep is really our way of being able to activate that, and really, really important and vital feature. If we were to think about some of them other things like training, school work, college work, work as a lecturer, a teacher, a communicator, well then that will always tell us that the more energy we have, the better decision we'll make. And that's based off our nutrition, it's based off our exercise, etc. So we really need to make sure that sleep is really fueling everything that we have there then again. So what are the aims of this session? What am I going to look to do? What ways am I going to look into doing it? And what's the best outcomes that I can achieve at the end of it? So what is sleep? It's a question that I'd often say to people. Stages of Sleep, REM, not the band. There we go. That's the one joke. I've made it. I'm over it now. We can move on with the rest of the lecture. And non-REM sleep, or non-rapid eye movement as it stands for. And I guess I often think about rapid eye movement and we just think of the physiology of the eyes kind of shuttering from left to right or up to down or horizontally, etc. while we sleep. But it's actually the indication. It's actually the diagnosis of what that's given to us in terms of information. What are the variables of good sleep? With forever and a day, it's in common day use. It's spoke of quite often, but how often have we heard of good variables of sleep, get your 8 hours a day? But there's many more, and that's what we'll be exploring here today as well. Deprivation of sleep, I would often say that it's like the toothache. We have our teeth, we use them to, aid and start mechanical digestion. We use it to chop down food before we can create some sort of saliva around the food to be then able to swallow it using peristalsis down through and into our stomach and starting the next stage of the digestive progress or process, should I say. Okay, fine. Why am I actually saying this? Well, if you have a pain, if you've ever been in a situation where you have a toothache, a nerve damage in with it, that pain will be pretty much constant. Everything you do on that day, you'll feel it, or it'll be around you, and it'll be your body's way of saying, hang on, there's something wrong here, you need to get this seen to. I think the benefits and the glory and the importance of sleep is only really illustrated when we are deprived of sleep. So we would often say, oh, the good night's sleep last night, or the terrible night's sleep, and does it affect you throughout the day? Then again, some more recent and maybe fascinating insight into sleep research has told us that placebo effect is quite large. And in fact, a study done in North Carolina only recently with athletes suggested that even the concept of wearable sleep monitors. So if we're looking at actigraphy, or we're looking at any sort of test and measurements, then again, we need to be careful that we don't zoom in on them and just solely rely on them. One of the quotations from that piece of research that kind of scared me a little bit, well, I would say scared, but kind of tentatively say that, is that one of the athletes had got 8 3/4 hour sleep one of the nights. But the watch had monitored it, and they're not accurate at the best of times, but it had said that they'd roughly broken sleep for at least 2.5, 3 hours of that. So when the athletes woke and started the sleep, the sleep diary, they had wrote that they felt good, they had a long sleep, an enjoyable sleep, they weren't woke for urination or defecation, etc. So they had a really good sleep and they felt good. But actually after, when they read the reading, or when they got the reading from the wearable sleep monitors, then they started to feel like, oh, well, actually I didn't get a good sleep, and they wrote about it later in the day, how they felt drained because they knew they were after being awake for 2.5 hours. So the effectiveness of wearables sometimes can have that placebo effect on our sleep as well. Sleep for students then, as most students and people who are involved in education, the whole thing of an all-nighter or being awake all night to study and is it beneficial, etc. We'll take a look at a piece of research in relation to that as well for you guys here. Health-sleep connection then, there are numerous amounts of benefits to maintaining good sleep, but on the flip side of that, there are huge elements that could have a detrimental effect on our health as well in terms of sleep. So it's important to be cognizant of them. What actually are the sleep recommendations? What do we know of them? What do we think of them? What are the ones that we maybe see in as I say, common day social media, newspapers or online articles as such as well. What's the information that we're getting based off them? So we'll have a look at the actual sleep recommendations from maybe the Sleep Foundation. And then, as always, I think it is famous to say, knowledge for knowledge's sake is useless. I do really believe with that. So we've academics, and then we have practical interventions or practitioners who are delivering things. And interestingly enough, you might have something in between where you're a pracademic. You have your little bit of research, but you have your practical element because you need to be able to implement both. So if I was to ask the group now to spend a bit of time doing a brain dump, and I said to you guys, what is sleep? What way would you classify what it is? I remember being asked this question, I think, 15, 20 years ago, maybe at this stage, and it really caught me off guard because it's something that obviously I do every single evening. It's part of my every single day routine, and if it's not good, if it's not looked after, I'm out of sorts, both mood-wise, emotionally, socially, physiologically in some cases. So it's something that's there all the time and something that you need to monitor and be aware of. So for me, the vital component of that would be looking at this and saying, right, first of all, let's classify or define what sleep is. So let me ask you another question. Okay, let me ask you another question. When was the last time you woke without an alarm? Some people are quite open and honest about this. If we think about the hypothalamus in terms of regulation and our body clock as Homo sapiens as a species in terms of at one stage being hunter-gatherer, well then actually what we see there is plenty of information around why we may have a sleep schedule that we try to maintain Monday through Friday. Let's say you wake at your 7 a.m. Alarm clock, you wait, etc. And then for some reason on the Saturday morning it comes, and people with kids are probably saying it's a little bit earlier than that, James, but actually at 7 a.m. you may wake, and the same on the Sunday then again. The routine and regulation around our body clock is vitally important, and it's housed and regulated through the thalamus within our brain and our limbic system, and also with our hypothalamus as well, only roughly around the size of a pea or a pearl. But it has a major effect, and the physiology teachers or A&P teachers within the classroom will be able to give you some information based around that. So really consider around the last time you got a poor night's sleep. How did you feel the next day? Were you more irritable? Did you feel sluggish or have difficulty concentrating? Perhaps you forgot details of a certain event or something you said earlier in that day. It's due part because your brain didn't have time needed to cleanse and restore itself, reset your memory and reboot all of the other critical functions of your body, including your immune system and metabolism. So what is sleep? A condition of the body and mind which typically occurs for several hours every night, in which the nervous system is inactive, the eyes closed, the postural muscles relaxed, and consciousness practically suspended. It is so interesting to see a body that is obviously clearly I would say in many cases catatonic. There's no movement, but the nervous system is inactive. But depending on what we've done prior to bed, there's issues and reasons why we don't get good night's sleep. Then again, we will examine the role of alcohol. We will examine the role of takeaway foods and foods generally late in the evening. What are them reasons why we're doing it then again? They would play a major role within it as well. So Sleep for Athletes, just a little video that we have here as well. Little one for Sleep for Athletes. I'm just going to put it on here for you so you have an idea of it.
Best athletes I've ever met are extremely good sleepers. Even though it doesn't look like anything is happening when you're asleep, incredible amounts of activity are actually happening inside your brain. So your brain is putting different connections together and it's amplifying circuits that are important. So for example, for an athlete, it allows them to consolidate in their brain all of the practice gains they made during the day, during their training. And that replaying of those events actually helps strengthen these connections and help improve the performance the next day. In addition to that, very high performance athletes also are very good at sleeping the night before an event. It's been demonstrated quite effectively, everything from golf to playing baseball to shooting basketballs, that you perform better if you got more restful sleep the night before. This is probably one of the strong reasons why a home team universally performs better on average, especially if the away team is traveling from another time zone.
Right, okay, so continuing on then, what do we know from what it's told us there is actually some interesting points really. Consolidation of information, probably you're aware of that, cerebral spinal fluid, wish-washing around and allowing that cleansing of the brain to maybe press reset, for want of a better phrase, and maybe too simplistic according to some academics, but there's a lot of research pointing towards that's what happens then again. So the element of having a good night's sleep in your own bed before a big game or big competition, again leading us to the idea that across different sports it's been proven that home teams, now there's a multitude of different reasons and variables there, not for one minute would we or anyone in sleep and sleep research suggest that that's the sole reason, but absolutely is it one of them contributing factors? I would imagine so, I would suggest so, and absolutely it is part of it then again. So 2/3 of adults fail to get the recommended 8 hours of nightly sleep. There is that flip side. We've that image of SpongeBob earlier, and when we think of sleep, this nice, warm and fuzzy feelings that we get, that feeling just before we nod off to sleep, it's always beneficial to us and always good to realise that there is the other side, and we do have people, of course, worldwide who have different issues going on in their life that might lead to them having broken or negative sleep. If that is the case, well, look, that's something that you would speak to or speak about with your coach or practitioner. Then again, sleep in the life cycle. Then, if we were to think of the average person living in the Western civilization, sleeps around 36% of their life. We live to 90 years. That means that your 32 years of our life will be spent asleep. So, we're spending, a third of our life asleep. We're gonna spend, time with loved ones after them hours spent asleep. So why not become good at it? Why not utilize it? Why not maximize it? And not just for an athletic skill, not just for a skill that we can use so that we can play sport and everything else, but a skill that we can use in life. A skill that we can use in life that's gonna help us, grow and develop better relationships and better situations where we can better situations where we can apply ourselves more fruitfully. So you've heard of it, Mike Atherton talking about being at home with his family, but no point in being at home with his family if he's not present. If we've a lack in sleep or a lack of sleep cycle that's beneficial, it's probably going to lead to the same type of thing. So what actually happens when we sleep during the sleep cycle? So again, you've probably heard of it, the stages of sleep cycle previously. This stage I'd usually say to students, go and research what it is, but for the purposes of this online piece of information that we'll be doing here today, I'm just going to go through it then again. The sleep cycle then, it's really, in terms of our ability to monitor it and magnify and understand what it is, it's defined by primarily by electrical activity in the brain, measured by an electroencephalogram, so an EEG, which again is a heard. And if we just look down at this stage here, if we look at this, the frequency, number of waves per second, this is the amplitude size of the wave. So apologies, this is actually monitoring how we're going from one heightened level right down to another one then again, and that could be just steering, that could be a bang outside, it could be something where we're still asleep but there's something disturbing it quite often. These sleep spindles that we'll look at here now in a moment, I'll give you more information around it, but if we were to really get into it and look for detailed, accurate, reliable and valid, well, the gold standard, if we had access to it and had the time to actually work with athletes on this, well then I think we'd have much more accurate information. There are more and more pieces out there in society, more and more pieces around sports that will help with the monitoring of sleep cycles, but this is one of the very early ones then again. So the four stages, obviously rapid eye movement, non-rapid eye movement 1, non-rapid eye movement 2, and non-rapid eye movement 3. So if we were to take it when we're awake and we're doing things all day, we're moving around, getting jobs done, working hard, planning, preparing, organising, completing tasks, our adrenal glands are probably releasing different hormones like cortisol, for example, in this example. But as we go to bed, as the day goes on, as we begin to shut down and start to mellow and relax for some of the rest of the day, what tends to happen then is the pineal gland or the pineal gland releases melatonin. Now, melatonin, caveat on melatonin, everybody and their brother is talking about melatonin. Oh my God, James, I've got melatonin tablets, they're amazing. Okay, well if they're working for you and they're helping aid your sleep and put you to sleep, terrific. But actually, the reality is that melatonin actually only starts the process of sleep. So it's like a shutting down phase. But I would suggest it's not the thing that puts us to sleep. It's the only, it would be like, as Matthew Walker, who wrote a quite brilliant book, Why We Sleep, speaks of it like the person at the start of a race who fires the gun. There's a hell of a long process to complete before we actually sleep, but melatonin might be the thing that is released within our system that allows that to happen then again, and that is a big part. So this is really it's really important as we go forward. We have these alpha waves, the ones that are on the left here, and hopefully that's quite clear on the image here in front of these alpha waves. And then we have this really beautiful moment where it's one of the favorite parts of my day anyway, and I think most people have always cited it as a really good thing. You feel that calmness, the breath is starting to slow down, the eyes are starting to close, and all of a sudden them alpha waves start to decrease, and we've taken our role within this NREM1. The alpha waves now are moved into this, and you can see that they become almost sporadic. And in this phase as well is probably a part where we have these hypnagogic sensations. Hypnagogic sensations, if you're anything like I am, particularly when I was growing up for some reason, I always had these kind of jumps or kicks while I was asleep, and they, in some cases they would wake me. They're called hypnagogic sensations, and they're meant to be an overlay from survival when we were living in trees and stuff, maybe alerting us to danger, or that we mightn't be completely safe in the environment that we're in as well. So it's an interesting part of it for people, and the issues around that then again going forward for these hypnagogic sensations. In NREM2 then it changes a little bit different, and we have these sleep spindles that are there, and if we go back to this previous one, you can see how erratic that them waves are in this one. But if we go to the non-REM, the sleep spindles tend to be different, and we go back and look at the amplitude and the duration of these sleep spindles going forward as well, if we were to monitor it on an EEG machine like we spoke about. Deep sleep versus REM, then deep sleep is often confused with REM, but the two are actually deep sleep is part of your sleep cycle in which your body recovers from the day. Vitally important, your body secretes hormones associated with cellular repair and rebuilding. You know, we think of protein, we think growth and repair, but when we think of sleep, it's very rare that we'd be talking about cellular repair. When you get enough sleep, you wake up feeling refreshed. Without enough, you'll feel tired even if you got a full night of rest. Typically, you'll see deep sleep on your sleep tracking devices in the first half of your night. It happens in relatively long segments while your heartbeat and your breathing is slow to their lowest levels. This is also the stage of sleep it's most difficult to wake you up. Deep sleep is as important, if not more important, than REM when it comes to physical rest. So keep an eye on this stage if you're tracking your sleep patterns. Then again, when we get into this delta waves section in the NREM stage 3, Now, in delta waves, actually, these ones are, as I suggested, important, but it's only when we get to REM that it actually starts to impede motor function. Our motor cortex is actually spiking and jumping around and doing all sorts of activity if we were to try and measure it. So there's a lot actually taking place and going on at that part or at that phase, but it's only, it's only really that it's inhibited or stopped by the brain stem. So the brain stem is stopping it from occurring, except your eyes. Again, very, very few explanations of this, only one of them coming from a theorist, little bit of a hero, a little bit of a mentor to myself. Dr. Robert Sapolsky speaks about physiology, the brain function, really, really good at his job. He would say that actually the REM is probably an overlay from, again, you guessed it, survival evolution, where our eyes were probably needing to go from left to right, up to down, horizontally, to keep an eye on predators that might be or in our vicinity to attack and challenge us. The sleep cycle generally takes 90 minutes to take place, and as we suggested, that REM cycle, deep, vivid dreams, dreams that, can scare us, wake us, give us some sort of interpretation of what's happening in our lives, and then we have all these other stages as well. I think I've said it to you before, and if I haven't, the NREM stages 3 and 4 have been coupled through most of the UK literature and are the same things, but in fact, in some of the US literature, you'll still find it down as 4 different phases. So, the brain dump part 3, what I would be saying again, is to look up this concept of sleep banking, as you can imagine. So, the definition around sleep banking is to sleep for long periods of time or to nap throughout the day, so as to gain more rest. It is useful when you know you'll experience sleep deprivation in the near future. Now, I'd imagine like yourselves, if you've ever had to or do have to go on long haul flights or have a flight to catch, and the flight, it's at 6 a.m, but you've got to be up, got to be in the airport for 4 a.m, but that means you got to be up for 3 a.m and have to shower at 2:30 a.m or whatever it is, vice versa. You will try to build up some of these sleep banking. Is it relatively new? Is there anything to substantially empirically sit down and say that it's definitely something that can aid athletes? There's not a lot of research around it, but it might be something that's coming in. And I also feel that, it's important to try and keep an open mind to these things as well. As anyone who has unlittly drifted off at their sleep at their desk will know, tiredness can really creep up on you when you least expect it. But a new study is offering some good news. It claims that we can bank sleep but store it up in advance of a tiring event. Researchers in the US invited a group of volunteers to adjust their sleep patterns so that the effect could be monitored. So what happened? 1 week, one half of the group were allowed sleep extra. One group were told to keep their sleep patterns the same. The following week, they were all sleep deprived. So again, we only see it, we only acknowledge it, we only are aware of the massive benefits of sleep when we are deprived of sleep. After this week, either extended or habitual sleep per night, all the volunteers came to the lab and they were given 3 hours of sleep per night for a week, explained Tracy Roop from the Walter Reed Army Institute research. And again, it's not something too dissimilar to what we see previously. We will always see money going into research. Probably don't see as much money going into research in other areas, but we certainly do in more westernized country that goes into the army. The results and the findings, they were given tasks of various complications. Tests showed that those who had banked the sleep were more resilient during the sleep restriction. They showed less performance deterioration with regards to reaction time and alertness than the group that had been given the habitual prior sleep. And then tests were even showed that a week after the experiment, the pre-stored sleepers were recovering better from their sleep deprivation than the habitual sleepers. Sleep banking, what we're basically saying is if you fill up your reserves and pay back your sleep debt ahead of time, you're better equipped to deal with challenges of sleep loss challenge. For high performance athletes, the research suggests an end to the end of day slump, but for athletes with major events on the horizon, could be a lifesaver. Napping is being shown to be very effective, at least improving performance, and some short-term researchers say that after some more testing, the theory could be worked into periodization plans for athletes. The next step of research, they say, is to find out exactly why the extra sleep can be banked. We'd like to know what's going on psychologically in the brain. The next step will be to do this in shorter study, but using brain imaging to see exactly what's happening or what's going on in the brain. So nap time, unfortunately for now, at least the research team is unable to quite determine how much you need to bank in terms of it. My hunch would be that it's very individualized. Adults usually don't need daytime naps if they have slept well for long enough at the night, but they are useful if there has been sleep loss at night. If you do need a nap, it's best not to do it later than mid-afternoon, and this is so you can get good sleep that night. Sleep inertia is something, then again, it's that transitional sleep. If you've ever woke up and tried to grab your phone or grab something from the side of a bed locker and it kind of falls over, it might be because of sleep inertia. It's reduced impaired performance, and there's a desire to return to sleep. The intensity and duration of sleep inertia is very based on situational factors. I have students all the time say, oh, my alarm went off, but I couldn't get up after. Sleep banking myths. Well, to be honest, I've trained myself to get by on 5 hours sleep. I've trained myself to get by on 5 hours sleep. Is this a myth, as I suggest? Absolutely it is. As Dwight K. Schrute tells us here, it's false. If we were to look at some of the most memorable and historic figures of maybe even through the 1900s into the 1950s, 60s onwards, if we were to take the likes of Margaret Thatcher, who, once proclaimed sleep is for wimps, ended up having early onset dementia, and I think Ronald Reagan was the same as well, boasting that he could get by on just 4 hours sleep. Both suffered badly with dementia later on in life. So sleep, actually, the older we get, the more effect it will have on us then in terms of the detrimental effect to our health. How much sleep is needed each night varies between people. The average adult needs around 8 hours sleep. Some need less and others need more. Most of us know from our experience how much we need to feel good the next day. Getting less than this builds a sleep debt. Sooner or later, this will have to be paid back. You might not notice in missing an hour or so every now and then, but it's not good to make a habit of it. If you do, you won't be able to think or react to things as quickly as before. Even if you don't feel sleepy, your brain won't be working as well as it could. Further research does need to be done to determine exactly how many nights are necessary. And as anyone who has tried to get an early night before a big day will know, it's one thing being in bed, it's another thing actually nodding off. A lot of our volunteers came into the lab and knowing they had to go to bed at 9 p.m. were concerned with what they would not be able to do, or what they would not be able to fall asleep. So again, constantly asked by coaches, calling up, ringing, emails, contact via social media. We've got a final on the horizon. We're going to be staying in a hotel the night before, and we're going to be up at this time and going to be prepared and do videos. And well, actually, let's have a look at what is good sleep variables, what can help aid good sleep, and what's going to actually inhibit good sleep as well, because some of these variables might have a negative connotation attached to them as well. Brain dump number 4, if I was to ask you to come up with good sleep variables, again, it's a challenge and a task that you can do in class, and it might be stopped and done via Zoom call or in class activity. Variables of good sleep then, the first one that we look at is diet, the environment that you're in. Breathing plays a role. Consistency is a major part. We spoke of the thalamus and the hypothalamus previously. And then exercise is another major contributing factor to good sleep variables. I suppose if you can hit diet, you've got a good environment in which to sleep, focus on good breathing techniques, have consistency to your sleep, and have exercise during the day, chances are you're in that privileged position of laying down and falling off into dreamland. First of all, we look at diet. So what sort of things will aid and help with our diet? Well, the role of omega-3s is massively important. Brain health and aging, even for parents who are having children, omega-3 is vitally important for that gestation period and growth for the brain of the fetus as well. Highly important that we have omega-3s. So they serve as a component of a brain cell membrane. So the more of that we can have, the more we can supply, produces cellular mediators, so it actually improves neural health, so the connections and connectivity between neurons will be aided. And then third of all, it reduces and resolves brain cellular inflammation that would lead to neuron cell death. So it's actually, helping us reduce it's actually helping us maintain the cell life. So rather than cells dying off earlier, we have a protection around them that can increase that neural activity. Now, apologies to the coffee drinkers, but it's not just coffee that has caffeine in it. Many people have other things that they have caffeine in, of course. Supplement energy drinks these days tend to be laced with a lot of caffeine, but in terms of coffee, limit it to 1-2 cups a day. The really good answer in the different class, somebody says, what of my cup is a litre cup. I think we're kind of missing the point when we go down them routes, but anyhow, in terms of coffee, if you can have your last cup maybe no later than 2 p.m. It takes probably an average person 5 to 8 hours for caffeine to reach its half-life. So even after 5 to 8 hours of having it drunk, there's still half of its life digestively and chemically within our bodies. Don't forget other sources of caffeine, which I mentioned: soda, fizzy drinks as we'd call them, chocolate, certain over-the-counter headache medicines like aspirin as well. So if you're somebody who takes them quite often, or they're part of your kind of routine, weekly, or if you're getting headaches, that just to be wary of that. Balancing hydration and waking up. I constantly have this with athletes. I can actually say it's happened maybe at least 3 to 5 times with athletes who are competing at Olympic level, competing at professional level, semi-professional level, dual career athletes, that actually what happens in this stage is really complicated, because you might say, listen, for your height, the amount of exercise you're doing, we might try and get you 2 to 3 litres of water a day. And at the end of the day is usually the time when we reflect. And I've had athletes in the past who might have said, I forgot to have 2 litres of water. And they rush to having them 2 litres of water and 1.5 litres, 2 litres of water, maybe over a 2 or a 3 hour period before they go to bed. Now, as you're aware, there is the downfall to the whole idea of being dehydrated, and we will wake up because of it. How often have you woke with gasping for some water? That side of it's important, but the flip side of it is just make sure that you're drinking it throughout the day and not just at the night, because yourself, the downside of that as we get older is the waking during the night to go use the toilet facilities. Then again, you want to limit your bathroom wake-ups as much as you can. So I would say maybe an hour and a half before bed, have your 8 ounces of water, a small cup, let's say, for example, and that should be able to help you limit the amount of bathroom wake-up times you have. The environment that we have, constantly getting asked questions around what's the best environment. If we go all the way back to our little buddy SpongeBob at the start, when we had the diagram up on screen, he kind of gave us information and gave us an insight into why sleep is important, and that idea that we have in our head of, you're in a nice warm bed and it's really cold outside, but it's really warm in my bedroom. Let's have a look if that's a little bit of a myth, that whole warm and fuzzy when we're talking about sleep. One of the first concepts that I will deal with is maybe a more modern concept. You've probably all heard the adage, idle time is the devil's plaything. Well, actually, I heard an interesting one. I heard an interesting one recently in relation to screen time. Is the devil's new plaything, because how much time does it take from us daily? How much time is it taking out of your actual activities that you could be spending with your family, your friends, your loved ones, etc.? And it can play a major role. In this image that I have up on screen here, it's probably one that most people are familiar with. If we can't sleep, one of the first things we do is we go for something that has sensation or that can take our minds off things. And I recently read about the kind of growth of something like TikTok as opposed to an Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Is that the attention span within youth has decreased substantially over the last 15 to 20 years, and it's not surprising to see that people's attention span are maybe 6 to 7 seconds, and they'll go on to something new then again. But this kind of idea of being awake late at night on the phone is only going to do one thing, and that's going to decrease your sleep quality, or decrease your opportunity of sleep to gain good sleep quality, to return back to the phase or the position you were in initially. So exposure to blue light from the screens of common electrical devices can inhibit melatonin production. Computers, TVs, phones, etc. Melatonin is the sleep hormone produced as the sun goes down, that is responsible for making us feel tired and ready. And that's all that it does. I said it earlier, it's like the guy at the start of the race. It's letting us feel, it's making us feel that we are tired and that we're ready to maybe have a rest, but that's all that it's doing. It's not putting us to sleep, nor does it have the role of doing that. It's starting the process of getting us ready for that. Ways to conquer blue light then: avoid use of screens maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours before going to bed if you possibly can. I don't know whether that's something you think you can do. Could you go 2 hours without looking at a screen before you go to bed? What are ways around it? Obviously low light in your bedroom, a lamp or something like that, and obviously maybe reading one of your favourite books. But again, it's a good question. 2 hours without any sort of blue light from your screen, whether it be a TV or a phone. Do you think you could do that? Now, noise. Noise is an interesting one for many different reasons, but one of the reasons being it's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult for us to control noise. Growing up in a house where you might have sisters and brothers, growing up in a house where there may be nieces and nephews, there might be lots of noise all the time around the house, and it would make it really, really difficult for you to sleep because of that. So, again, you'd have to think of the intentionality when we're going through these things. So, noise, especially when loud and abrupt, can prevent us from having a restorative sleep. Wow, who knew? 2 ways of maybe conquering this in terms of the National Sleep Foundation. They tell us that AirPods, sorry Apple, not that they'll be ever listening to this, but if they are, apologies. AirPods, you can use them, and some people I've spoken to who may have little bouts of anxiety aren't fans of these, because obviously when you put AirPods in, you can kind of hear your heart rate or hear things physiologically within the body as such, and some aren't. And some use a heater or a fan. I know that the England national team for the World Cup, when Wayne Rooney and David Beckham and everything were involved, they spoke of how they input fans into their room, and the noise of the fan actually helped them sleep as well, so they could actually sleep because of that. So a constant noise, it might be a low noise, but it might be a noise that's not completely disruptive. Another one, as I said, being too cold or too hot can result in a waking time, so most people sleep best in a cool environment. Breathing, anything that makes breathing more difficult can disrupt the sleep. If you have nasal congestion, everybody's probably had the flu. Anyone who's had COVID is aware of it. Being overweight, smoking, and then allergies can actually affect it then again. Breathing through your nose is much more effective than using your mouth. Breathing through your mouth reduces oxygenation of the whole body. Try breathing more regularly through your nose, as it is a direct access to the blood oxygen barrier, and deep breathing techniques can help in this process also. What you're looking for next is consistency. You're looking for consistency. Consistent sleep schedules encourages optimal deep and REM sleep, important for the optimal flow of neurotransmitters and hormones that help regulate our bodies. So consistency. Try to maintain a rest pattern. Going to sleep every night around the same time can effectively train your body to start powering down for the night. Took me a long time to get to this. It's probably a little bit like a lot of people who are maybe viewing this, maybe staying awake late into the evening, or a little bit later into the evening, and it can be detrimental when we're trying to sleep then again. Key cornerstone, as we know, with all elements, all facets, all parts of sleep and all parts of health, I would say, always will have a role with exercise. So that's the reason, or one of the reasons, why we need to maintain exercise daily. is because of reasons like this. So what does it do? Well, it reduces anxiety, it improves our sleep, increases blood production, it increases self-confidence, and it improves brain plasticity. So again, you may have one or two people who've heard this and come up with the whole, oh, well, does neuroplasticity actually decrease after the level of 25, or is it no longer viable after that age? No, plasticity can continue on throughout the lifespan. Brain dump 5, again, questions that might come to you if you're doing this at distance learning. You may have to answer at a later time, but this one might be around sleep deprivation. So what happens to your body and your brain if you don't get sleep? What actually starts to happen? What actually starts to begin in these situations? Really, really difficult. Really, really difficult. So in them situations, you might be stuck. Okay, so let's think of it. So sleep is so critical for many parts of our body and our mind. It strengthens the immune system and it helps regulate metabolism. It can clear out toxins that build up in the brain and prevent neurodegenerative diseases. Sleep is like the dishwasher of the brain. Adenosine acting in the basal forebrain is a key mediator of sleep homeostasis. Extracellular adenosine concentrations during wakefulness, especially during prolonged wakefulness, and lead to increased sleep pressure and subsequent rebound sleep. So the diagram on the board, although it's not too sure why it's shown up there, pixelated at best. Apologies on that, not sure what's happened there. But anyhow, what we see is these molecules of caffeine are blocking these molecules of adenosine that are saying, James, it's sneaking up on you, it's time to have some rest. Okay, I'll have a can of Red Bull and I'll have a nice latte or whatever it may be in terms of caffeine into my system. And these caffeinated molecules will then start to block the adenosine molecules. Once that starts to happen, then I can stay awake or feel wakeful. So I'm often asked this question in relation to, how long can somebody stay awake without it being detrimental to their health, or, these wakeful periods versus rest periods and sleep periods. And one of the things that often comes up when we speak about this is the idea around, how long can we go without food and how long can we go without, let's say, water, for example. So 70 days with food, if we've got some source of water, fluid, hydration, looked after us before our vital functions begin to shut down and deteriorate. Without water, it's a little bit different. It's up to a week, and there are a number of different reasons why it would deteriorate or accelerate much quicker than without foods. Sleep, at the time of doing this, the most accurate source that I can find without any form of sleep is around 11 days. And after that, actually what we start to do is we start to go into what will be classified as a pre-diabetic phase. We start to go into a phase where some of our vital organs are beginning to deteriorate and suffer from it. Attention, brainwave activity, all of these things start to suffer and deteriorate. Why is sleep so important for students? Why is it so important for everybody is what I'd be saying, but is there anything particular why we think it would be in relation to students? We spend a lot of day using the majority of our cognitive load, exploring our cognitive load and our understanding of that. But what do we know in relation to it? If our brain is like a sponge and it's soaking up things, then it soaks up information all day long. Lecture halls, one end to the next, etc. And then we're back out again. After you learn something new, when we sleep, the brain gets to press save on new information. So we know that memory needs sleep after learning. So in order for that to happen, consolidation of information is the way they'd refer to it in most of the books, but press and save on it is an interesting way, because we have our analogy, don't we, from cognitive psychology. So if that's the case, we need sleep before learning as well. If you soak up from information with good sleep, then we try to do so with poor sleep. The sponge will flood. The all-nighter for students, something that's very, very prominent. I don't think any student who reads this will all of a sudden stop doing something like an all-nighter if there's a deadline to meet and they're doing their best to try and meet this deadline. then I think they'll have a greater chance of maybe suffering in relation to sleep deprivation and sleep loss. In a study then of 535 students done over a longitudinal 4-year period, results suggest that regardless of how much students really study each day, if that student sacrifices sleep time to study more than usual, he or she will have more trouble understanding material taught in class and can be more likely to struggle on an assignment or the test the following day. If we look at it in the terms of the chart there, learning can take place much more actively with sleep as opposed to no sleep through the Nature of Neuroscience and Current Biology journal. Again, if we think about it, we're looking at the neural connectivity. In the same paper, it's talking about this importance of sleep and learning, but not also learning, memory of learning, and the reconsolidation of material too. This is something that really kind of stood out, and as I mentioned earlier, you've got the likes of Margaret Thatcher, you've got the likes of Ronald Reagan, who maybe suffered later in life because of a lack of sleep over long periods of time. Sleep and Alzheimer's, which is obviously falls under the umbrella of dementia, let's say, but if we look on the left hand side, we've got an image of what a healthy brain would look like in terms of our grey and our white matter. If there is severe Alzheimer's, which is a degenerative disease, so you can imagine physiologically that the degenerative disease will lead to insufficient sleep is a key lifestyle factor determining whether or not you develop Alzheimer's disease. Sleep and diabetes, then again, moderate reductions of sleep for just 1 week disrupts blood sugar levels so profoundly that you would be classified as a pre-diabetic. Sleep in the heart, leading cause of death in the world is coronary artery disease, and which claims around 8.76 million deaths per year. It's one of them again, you go back and common kind of misconceptions. If you were to ask somebody what disease takes most lives every year, people would maybe push towards or have an idea around the idea of cancer. But actually, when we look at heart disease and what happens with atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis in terms of the plaque ruptures and build-ups within, as we said previously, within the arteries, it's going to cause major dysfunction. So sleep and mental health, this is something that again is come from Matthew Walker's book when he speaks about Charlotte Bronte's pathetic wisdom. A ruffled mind makes a restless pillow. So if we have stuff on our mind or we're suffering mentally with things, then actually we could be in a situation where there's issues and concerns around these things as well. That's one of the biggest parts of what we're talking about here. So it is important to seek medical advice and real registered accredited mental health advice too. Sleep disruption further contributes to all major psychiatric conditions including depression, anxiety and suicidality. Sleep and our diet. Perhaps you've also noticed the desire to eat more when you're tired. This is no coincidence. Too little sleep swells concentrations of ghrelin that makes you feel hungry while suppressing a companion hormone that otherwise signals food satisfaction. Now, again, if we continue with some of our work on our brain dumps ourselves, I would ask you to look up the sleep recommendations. What have you found? Where have you got your information? And what's it actually in relation to then again? Okay, so let's have a look at them. If we look on the left hand side of the diagram on the chart, we've got the hours of sleep. And down the bottom we have the different stages of life. Starting off with 0 to 3 months, 4 to 11, 1 to 2 years of age, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 13, 14 to 17, 18 to 25, 26 to 64, and then older adults 65 then again. So you can see right in the middle the optimal is the blue or recommended, may be appropriate in this kind of what we would call turquoise, and then not recommended is beyond maybe 18-19 hours sleep for a child who's maybe a newborn. If we go into the kind of category you guys would be in 18 to 25 or 26 to 64 majority of the time, probably looking at 7 to 9 hours, and then anything under 6 would be dangerous, and anything over 10, you'd need to seek medical advice then as well. So we're going to finish with some of these 10 practical tips on sleep, and they're important then again, because we have lots of knowledge. How do we actually acquire movement on the knowledge that we have in order to make sure and maintain, and to maintain slash good sleep practices. Good sleep practices is what I'm looking at here, which for me is kind of important. First one, stick to a sleep schedule. Go to bed and wake up at the same time each day. As creatures of habit, people have a hard time adjusting to change in sleep patterns. Sleeping later on weekends won't fully make up for lack of sleep during the week, and it'll make it harder to wake up for early on Monday mornings. Set an alarm for bed. This is my key one, the one that I love most. It was something I never thought of doing until I read, again, Matthew Walker's book, Highly Important, Highly Useful. So, instead of the 6:30, 6:45, 50, etc., you have something with the PM on it. And if there's only one piece of advice you remember from these 12 tips, maybe it's important to kind of do that as well. So exercise is great, but not too late in the day. Try to exercise at least 30 minutes on most days, but no later than 2 to 3 hours before bed then again. As we mentioned, limit caffeine to the best of your capability, and if you are going to take it, try and do it as early as you possibly can, prior to starting your kind of downward slog into sleep. Avoid large meals, beverages and alcoholic drinks before bed. Having a nightcap or alcoholic beverage before sleep may help you relax, but heavy use robs you of your REM, keeps you in lighter stages of sleep. Heavy alcohol ingestion also may contribute to impairment in breathing at night. A light snack is okay, but large meals can cause indigestion, which interferes with sleep. And drinking too many fluids at night will cause frequent wakings to urinate. A dark bedroom, a cool bedroom, a gadget-free bedroom. Get rid of anything in your bedroom that might distract you from sleep, such as noises, bright lights, uncomfortable bed or warm temperatures. You sleep better if the temperature is kept at a cool side. A TV, cell phone, computer in the bedroom can be distraction and deprive you of that much needed sleep. 7. Don't take naps after 3 p.m. Naps can help you help make up for lost sleep, but late afternoon naps can make it harder to fall asleep at night. Relax before bed. Don't overschedule your day so that no time is left for unwinding. A relaxing activity such as reading or listening to music should be part of your bedtime ritual. Take a hot bath before bed in some cases. The drop in body temperature after getting out of a bath may help you feel sleepy, and the bath can help you relax and slow down. You're more ready to sleep. Number 9, one that we maybe aren't privy to as much when we live in a country called Ireland, and we have got erratic weather. I think I'm being kind calling the weather erratic, but anyway, have the right sunlight exposure. Daylight is key to regulating daily sleep patterns. Try to get outside in natural sunlight for at least 30 minutes each day. Sleep experts recommend that if you have problems falling asleep, you should get an hour of exposure to morning sunlight and turn down the lights before bed then again. That's really important to, if we can, to turn down them lights and maybe just calm it down a little bit before we have any sort of issues that may lead to that for us going forward then again. 10. Don't lie in bed awake. If you find yourself still awake after staying in bed for more than 20 minutes, if you're starting to feel anxious or worried, get up and do some relaxing activity until you feel sleepy, like sitting in a nice comfortable chair and reading a book. And the anxiety of not being able to sleep can make it harder to fall asleep. I've included this one from Sir Alex Ferguson. The life of an athlete is one that, can be very regimental, but athletes are creatures of habit, and they can improve, drastically improve on their sleep skills, their sleep hygiene, the ability to focus on sleep. And he talks about change and getting used to it as well, and that change team makes doesn't occur overnight, make sure you don't do it alone. For me, this one here, really important, really important theme coming from the quotation is that actually you will need to practice at sleep. You're not going to be able to just make all these changes in one night and start to get 10 fantastic uninterrupted hours sleep by just practicing these things on a one-off basis. They take time, routine, structure, time, routine, structure. They take it. Just a quotation here from Usain Bolt, who is standing beside his world record of 9.58 seconds, and he says, sleep is the glue that keeps all of my training and performance together. He's known to be to bank sleep. He's known to sleep during the day after training exercises and sessions. So it's not averred to us to have an idea that one of the world's greatest athletes, probably of all time, speaks about sleep in such an important way. The sleep loss epidemic is the greatest public health challenge we face in the 24th century in developed nations. We can be reunited with the most powerful elixir of wellness and health, then we may remember what it feels like to be truly awake during the day and reclaim the life of the living. Thank you for your participation and your attention and concentration during today's lecture. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them or email me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.